But we begin with how defendant Trump is struggling to run his campaign while stuck inside this courtroom today, a challenge partly of the defendant's own making, because he is the one who over and over delayed this and other cases. Now he's in one at this unfortunate time period for him. Today we learned Trump must be present for basically the whole trial. That could run 6 weeks or more. The judge ruled, for example, against defendant Trump's request to skip certain days. And the campaign does plan more traditional events on weekends and using the court's off day, Wednesdays, for fundraising. The tension with the campaign schedule goes way beyond the calendar. Evidence shows voters are repelled by this damning evidence and the whole ordeal of a criminal trial. And that may be why Trump delayed and delayed and delayed today from happening earlier. It's also, of course, why he's accused rivals in both parties of supposed crimes. And it's why most people view this trial and the claims here as pretty serious. Many Republicans say they would oppose Trump if he were ultimately convicted. Those views are a reminder that many people oppose electing a convicted felon to the White House and defer to the courts, not public debate or hyperbole, to actually find out if any given defendant running for office is guilty. I want to bring in our panel, starting with the aforementioned Lawrence O'Donnell, who joins us. Lawrence?
Great to be here, all right.
Your thoughts and the point that we talk a lot in the words of law, legality, and crime. People talk about the insurrection like a crime. But the polling suggests a lot of people are waiting for the court system to decide if he's
Yeah, well, I don't think it has any impact on his campaign schedule at all. He's already the laziest presidential campaigner in history. This is a presidential campaign that can go days on end doing nothing or putting out a video that takes 8 minutes of his time at home. And we saw how he's going to campaign. He's going to go out to those microphones, which they should not have, in the courthouse, and he's going to campaign in the courthouse every day, before the trial, after the trial. You've never seen a criminal defendant get that option before of, yeah, whenever you're walking in or out of the courtroom, we're going to make sure there's a whole, camera bank over here and microphones for you as a criminal defendant to say whatever you want to about the case. And the giant problem with that in this particular case is Donald Trump is not going to testify. He's not going to testify in any of his cases, especially not this one. But he is going to, in effect, testify in the courthouse every single day by going out to the only thing we can see, since we're not allowed in the courtroom with cameras. Right. He's going to be the only televised participant in this trial, and everything he says out there would be, as you know, inadmissible in the courtroom. And it will all be relevant to the courtroom. It'll be relevant to the way people perceive what's going on in the courtroom. And the DA is not going to follow him to that microphone. There is no plan at all in the DA's office to how do you counter a criminal defendant going to a national microphone every single day, minimum of twice. And their answer to that is, we don't know. We work in the courtroom. The minimal thing that should have been established is that microphone setup just isn't there in the courthouse. That the judge could have controlled. They didn't. And so the guy who will never testify under oath will be out there at the microphone campaigning, in effect, every day of the trial.
And Joy is still with us as we look at that campaign contrast. Your thoughts on both what Lawrence says and the pitfall for Trump, that if he actually did what he claims he would do and testified, he'd be out of control, he'd be subject to the rules of evidence, and it might not go as well.
It might not go as well, and I think Lawrence makes a really good point. There is the Donald Trump laziness aspect of it, absolutely, but he's not lazy when it comes to talking and running his mouth. This is terrible for the campaign because the facts in this case, as sort of slimy as they are, take us back to the first time he ran and the problem that began the very month that he began running for president. I went back over what Michael Cohen was charged with by the Jeff Sessions, Donald Trump Justice Department, by the way. This was not by some liberal Justice Department. Michael Cohen was charged by Donald Trump's Justice Department. In June of the year Donald Trump begins running for president, June of 2015, he starts running. Michael Cohen doesn't join the campaign, but they give him a campaign email. Within the very first month of Donald Trump's first campaign, he and David Pecker start talking about squashing any stories that might be negative regarding women. They start doing that. Fast forward to the following summer, you have Karen McDougal come out in June and start saying she was going to talk. They buy her limited life rights, or at least they offer to, for $125,000. We're now talking about the June before the election. They can't even close that deal before Stormy Daniels comes out and says she's going to talk too. And so they're literally, let me just read this one little very quick thing that I'm going to read. This is from the Michael Cohen indictment. Cohen caused and made the payments described herein. That's through David Pecker to Karen McDougal and to Stormy Daniels, or he made that one directly to Stormy Daniels, in order to influence the 2016 presidential election. In doing so, he coordinated with one or more members of the campaign, including through meetings and phone calls about the fact, nature, and timing of the payments. As a result of the payments solicited and made by Cohen, neither woman one nor woman two spoke to the press prior to the election. They charged him with campaign finance violations, Ari. They charged him with that crime and named Donald Trump without using his name as individual one. The problem for Donald Trump is that all of the facts in this case, as sort of gross as they are for us to think about, all go to the fact that the entirety of his initial campaign for president was plagued by this one issue of his relationships outside of his marriage with women. And then you get to October when the Access Hollywood tape drops. It's very clear when you just read the Cohen indictment that this was a crisis for Donald Trump's campaign. It's very hard to get outside of these facts. And you can say whatever you want about Michael Cohen. The reason that he is a convicted felon is the stuff he was not before he did this for Donald Trump. Everything he did that is a crime that they're going to try to use to impeach him, he did for individual one. So every fact in this case is going to be both unnerving, I think, to independent voters who will be reminded and jogged back into their original vision of Donald Trump as this undisciplined cheater who cheats on his marriage and who cheated in the election.
Look, I hate to ever disagree with Lawrence O'Donnell, but I'm going to in this moment because I do think, and we've all talked about this a little bit, the more sometimes you see Donald Trump, the more people see Donald Trump, the more we saw sleepy Donald Trump today a little bit. He didn't say anything particularly memorable at the cameras. He may in the days to come. There's many days to come, but he also may say things that are very crazy. And that, I think, may also influence independent voters. We don't know yet. I will say to Joy's point, I mean, one of the most interesting things about this, and Rachel mentioned this too, the National Enquirer of this all, which is a big part of this story. We have Lachlan Cartwright on tonight on the show, who was the #2 guy at the National Enquirer. He said in his New York Times piece, he wrote, "It was the 13-page statement of facts that brought me to tears." Right? This is the guy who's the #2 at the National Enquirer, okay? Because of the role they played in Catch and Kill. And not just one story, multiple stories. And that tells you a lot about who Donald Trump is. So we don't know how the public will consume it. New Yorkers aren't talking about it on the streets today. But it does tell you about his character. It does tell you about who he is. It does tell you about his willingness to do anything, as Chris said earlier, to hold on to power.
I mean, and the other piece of it, I think, I agree with you, Jen, is we're going to get some new information here. I mean, Bragg is not just going to have Michael Cohen there on the witness stand for weeks on end. He's bringing in, we already have a list of potential witnesses. You know, Karen McDougal is going to be up there. Keith Davidson, the lawyer for both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, is going to be up there. The entire editorial infrastructure of AMI and the National Enquirer are going to be up there. Dave Pecker, Dylan Howard, Jeffrey McConney, the comptroller for the Trump Organization. These people have new perspective on a very tawdry story. And, like, if there's one thing this country likes, is a great story.
Can I add two more to that? I mean, Madeline Westerhout, am I saying her last name correct?
Yes.
And Hope Hicks. These were people, I mean, Madeline Westerhout sat literally outside of the Oval Office. You cannot get closer to the Oval Office than the desk she sat at. She saw everybody who went in. She saw everybody who went out. She could look through the little peephole in the Oval Office and see who was in there. She knows a lot. Hope Hicks was on every phone call he was on. So what will we learn? We don't know, but we will certainly learn more about how they discuss this strategically on the campaign as a means of helping his campaign. And that seems to be part of the story here.
And to the point of how important this was for the Trump campaign, this issue was something that Trump was trying to use against Hillary Clinton's candidacy because of her husband. And so we'll recall that at the debates, it was Donald Trump who decided, I'm going to invite women who've made accusations against Bill Clinton. That was his debate strategy. Invite women as guests of the Trump side of the debate who've made accusations against Bill Clinton. That's how important Donald Trump and the Trump campaign believed this issue was. And he did that before they purchased Stormy Daniels' silence, right? So he's the guy who's brought these women to the debate. Yeah. Now Stormy Daniels might be coming out in the last couple of weeks of the campaign and telling her story. Well, we have to stop that because that will destroy that debate strategy of bringing those women.
I also think, to circle back to where you started at the polling about how people are evaluating this, I think, Lawrence, you're right. You're going to get this sort of unfettered, like, Trump will be at the cameras. Then what will be happening inside the courtroom will be under the rules of evidence but off camera. Still a tawdry and like gross story. My instinct is that ultimately, like, the outcome and the verdict matters more than anything. Like, it just seems to me, if I had to bet, what will be the political effect of this is a guilty verdict will hurt him considerably, and something short of that won't, or it might help him. And I mean, so my going into this, that's my level setting, is that the people that are persuadable, or the mushy middle, or whoever's in the middle, are kind of looking from guidance from the system to say what it determines is the verdict.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.